Hi, I'm Peter Capaldi. I play the Doctor, and you're watching EMS Productions.
Hello everybody, welcome along to today's video where I'm going to be looking back at last week's episode of Doctor Who, the second part in the three-part Monk trilogy. It's The Pyramid at the End of the World. So yes, we come to this episode. I'm not going to keep saying the title because it's just a stupidly long one, frankly. I'm sure they could have come up with a slightly more shortened title than that. It did seem a bit excessive. But this is episode 7 of the series, the second part in this sort of loose Monk trilogy, I think it's being called, at the moment at least, it seems, as it's kind of linked into the previous episode where we saw essentially the monks' simulation of their invasion. And now we kind of see the lead up to them actually invading, and then next week seems to be after they've already invaded. So we're kind of seeing each stage of it all building up through it. And this episode obviously focused on how it's all caused, how the monks taking over the world is caused. And it was the kind of the idea of the whole episode and this whole end of the world thing was about how lots of tiny little mistakes lead to the end of the world in a sense. And I thought it was really brilliant sort of idea brought throughout the episode, how all these little tiny mistakes on top of each other cause the end of the world in the long run, just from breaking your glasses to breaking some, having a night out and some drinks and breaking some glass, kind of the sort of a parallel of that can then lead to something so catastrophic as the end of the world, essentially, that it's all planned and built through. Was I thought quite a good, nice little concept, and was really well kind of realised through the episode, is sort of building up these little things that went wrong, which gradually led up to the ending where it all kind of fell apart. But as continuing in the vein of this series, I thought some of the visuals were absolutely brilliant. Again, there was a very big sort of scale, it felt, to this episode, as we had this sort of stuff from the agricultural something or other place, Agrifields, I can't remember what it was called, but that place in the UK. Then we were over into Mezistan, and we're just kind of all over the place a bit in these really well realised locations, particularly the one with the pyramid, of course, into Mezistan. The visuals on that I thought were absolutely stunning, and it just kind of, that pyramid looks really striking and really brilliantly sort of realised in CGI through that, and just continues in the vein of this series where we've had a huge amount of brilliant looking sort of sets and scenery. We also got a fair bit more of the monks in this episode, who are obviously kind of the main sort of villain, it seems at least, of these kind of 3 episodes it seems to be leading through. And certainly the whole concept with these monks that they need consent to invade. They require sort of, and you need to love them essentially, which is a slightly odd and disturbing concept, that you've got to love these mouldy-faced monks to accept their help, because the world is apparently going to end according to them. It's all very interestingly kind of developed, and obviously from their side of things. And it felt at times like it wasn't that well explained as to quite why the monks needed consent. It was kind of just, they needed to be accepted, they needed love, because love is slavery or something along those lines. It was all a little bit vague and not kind of, I felt, fully kind of described as to what the whole thing was. And also there were just a couple of sort of plot conveniences. Why was the Doctor blowing up the Agrifuels place not in their simulation? Why did that suddenly not the doomsday clock down? They didn't really realise what was going on when they seemingly planned out absolutely everything. Why was it that particular action from the Doctor was completely unexpected? I'm not quite sure, given they'd already simulated the Doctor previously in the previous episode. So you think they would have been able to have that as part of the simulation and then solve it or something. It seemed a little bit odd there, why that was suddenly, a bit of a unexpected moment for the monks. It did, of course, still lead to the same outcome in the end of, obviously, Bill accepting the monk, or giving consent to the monks to come in and invade and take over. But it was kind of a bit odd that they hadn't predicted that and seen that coming. I mean, even if it had the same outcome in the end, it seemed as if they didn't realise it was going to pan out that way, which, given that these monks seem to be all powerful, all knowing with these simulations and everything, you thought they would have predicted that. And it also feels like we've got only very vague details about the monks. We don't really know anything about them. Where are they from? Sort of, where do they get all their power from? Why was there a pyramid that suddenly appeared in the middle of Temesistan? We never really got an explanation for that, other than it's a secret spaceship, because Bill says it's a secret spaceship. Seemed to be about the only explanation we got for that. So it just felt like there were a lot of kind of lack of explanation in this episode. Maybe we will get it in episode 8. There'll be a lot more detail about the monks, I don't know. Obviously we don't know at the moment, but it just felt a little bit like that was a bit lacking in this episode, that it didn't feel like there was enough kind of detail on who the monks really are, or how they get their power and all this kind of thing. It just was all a bit vague and left a bit open-ended, I felt. That's not to say that it really kind of made a massive detriment to my enjoyment of the episode. I still did really enjoy this episode. It probably wasn't my favourite episode of the series, but I did think it was a very good kind of continuation of last week's episode, even if, as I've seen some people say, probably last week's episode could have been cut down into 5 or 10 minutes, but personally I'm still really pleased that we got that episode because it was so phenomenal last week. But it was brilliant to see the Doctor taking on his role as President of the World again, properly sort of for a full episode. He really is the actual President of the World. Everybody's just like, cool, okay, fair enough, you are the President of the World. And the Doctor straight away getting involved with things. Obviously it's interesting to follow how his blindness is affecting things again and rather causes disasters at the end of the episode, I think it's fair to say. But overall I thought Peter's performance in this episode was brilliant as always. Some of the lines he got about sort of stupid handsome Doctor and all those lines towards the end I just thought were absolutely brilliant, and Peter played them perfectly. Clearly Peter Harness or Stephen Moffat, whoever wrote those lines, did a brilliant job of it, and I just thought, just reminded me again how much I love Peter the Doctor, and just, yes, the way he plays the sort of performance, the lines he uses, I just think it's absolutely brilliant. And I guess the other major thing to talk about has to be this sort of ending, those last couple of minutes, where it all rather falls apart because the Doctor is blind. Yes, I'm not going to lie, there was a slight bit of plot convenience there, given that suddenly the door wouldn't open because emergency protocol, suddenly the sonic screwdriver doesn't work just because. Was a little bit of plot convenience, you have to say, but it still was a great scene and a great way to kind of throw the whole thing into catastrophe, giving the Doctor his eyesight back, actually, but rather causing a lot more problems as the Bill accepts consent and clearly leads into what's going to be the full-on invasion next week, or, well, the invasion has already happened next week, it seems. Will be kind of like 6 months down the line of how this new world with the monks completely ruling everything, how that's all going to play out. But it was a brilliant little scene with the Doctor revealing that he's blind to Bill, and how kind of sort of angry at him but angry at herself she kind of feels about it all, because I'm sure she feels a bit responsible because it was her in Oxygen who was the one who the Doctor borrowed her, or gave her, I'm losing track of this episode, the Doctor gave her his helmet so that he would suffer from it and obviously cause the blindness, and now he is actually blind and it's kind of caused the end of the world in a sense because the monk's taken over, and that seems to be quite bad. But I think other than that, plot-wise, there's not a huge amount more to say. I mean, I've kind of already covered it, but I think the monks are a really good new creation for a villain. Not really something... although they may look visually a little bit similar to some of the things we've seen before, like the Pyrovals from the Fires of Pompeii, they are a very different sort of alien concept, and the whole concept of needing consent to take over is a very interesting one, I think, and something that hasn't really been played up too much in Doctor Who previously. And I'm certainly looking forward to seeing a lot more of them in next week's episode and kind of how this whole situation is resolved. But overall, I felt this episode was kind of a sort of solidly good episode. It didn't, watching it either in the first or the second viewing, I didn't find either time it was absolutely kind of one of my all-time favourites. It was a good episode. It fits well within this Monk trilogy, I think, and probably watching all 3 episodes back together once we get episode 8, I think it will become a much better, more complete story than maybe watching it in parts individually over sort of week to week. I think once you've got the whole lot, I'm sure it'll be a lot better. But for now, it felt like your more kind of average 7.58 out of 10 sort of run-of-the-mill episode that's more kind of setting... that obviously is kind of has its own story within it about the monks kind of sort of preparing their invasion and everything kind of going wrong, leading to that. The whole concept with the Doomsday Clock as well was quite an interesting idea, or element to use in Doctor Who, which we haven't seen before, which was quite interesting for that. But again, there were some plot conveniences, like why was the Earth suddenly near destruction or something? Why were we nearly at the end of the world? We haven't seen that at all previously in this series, and there didn't seem to be any clear reason as to why that was a thing. Why suddenly the Earth is in dire consequences and it's all going pretty terrible unless the monks take over. Why are we all going to die in a year, kind of thing? It was all just a bit unclear, and it felt like it needed to have been a bit more built up through the series so far as to issues of, even if it's just a couple of scenes in sort of some of the Earthbound episodes like the pilot or Knock Knock, just a couple of scenes, maybe even just a TV clipping or something, or a TV clip of something about a disaster around the world or it's all going wrong kind of thing, just to make it a bit more build up to this episode, because it does feel a bit out of the blue that suddenly the world is ending. But overall, with those plot sort of conveniences aside, it still was a good episode, one that I did enjoy, and I think will be built on even more next week with The Lie of the Land. So certainly, it was by no means a bad episode, just not an all-time classic. But there we go, guys. Do let me know in the comments below whether you thought it was an all-time classic, maybe thought it was a bit better than me, or not quite so good, I don't know. Just let me know, I'd love to hear your opinions and all that as well. And finally, as usual, guys, remember to like the video, subscribe if you're new here, and I'll see you again very soon for another video. Goodbye!